The mystery of the 8th Heroine is one of the most equivocal, unsolved riddles in Breath of the Wild. Also referred to by its nickname the Bronze Giant due to the color of the rock it's carved from, the statue as it stands tucked away from view in the Gerudo Highlands remains an enigma to this day. Who built it? In whose honor? And why here on a remote cliffside in such an unforgiving climate? Why have they been wiped from history as the in-game dialogue and quest log suggest? Ever since the game's launch in 2017, there have been many attempts to piece together its origin, its meaning, and moreover, its identity. And there's no shortage of creative, well-researched ideas and theories about this captivating mystery. Unfortunately, none have been able to find the evidence needed to seal the deal, so to speak, as the game nor the book provide sufficient information to work with. And so, just like with the mystery of the Zonai, we'll likely have to wait for the sequel to hopefully shed more light on it and give us the answers we crave. But before that moment arrives, I want to revisit this mystery one last time, to see if I can offer a new perspective on this ancient riddle now that we have more information about the sequel. And to help me drive this idea into your eyes and ears, I have invited my good friend Conrad from the Commonwealth Realm, one of the OG Breath of the Wild theorists on the platform. Ladies and gentlemen, we present to you what I believe to be the true face of the 8th Heroine, Patricia the Sand Seal. Alright, I'm kidding. It's actually this one.
Let's start with a brief recap of the mystery behind the statue, or should I say, statues. Yes, as you probably surmised from the 8 in the name, it's not the only statue out there. The other 7 are located in the eastern part of the scorching desert. And as opposed to the elusive bronze giant, these statues are well known and even revered by the Gerudo themselves. They are believed to represent 7 important historical figures who each possessed a particular skill. And due to the successful translation of the text featuring on the magnificent stoneworks, we know that they represent none other than the mythical 7 sages, a group of individuals who repeatedly awaken in times of hardship to help the hero and princess fend off the evil tormenting Hyrule, many a time involving Ganondorf or his alter ego, Ganon. It seems the ancient Gerudo wanted to memorialize the sages, and thus they erected these massive stone monuments in their honor. Although the existence of the 7 are common knowledge among the present-day Gerudo, the actual meaning, implication, and history seem to have been all but lost to the women of the desert. They don't know who each individual statue represents, nor do they even refer to them as sages. The archaeologist in Gerudo Town who studies the monuments, named Rutana, refers to them as the divine protectors of the Gerudo. It even implies the Gerudo believe them to be all female warriors, even though the 7 sages have historically been a mix of many different races and genders. It shows that while her research is slowly progressing, her deeper understanding is still rife with misinterpretation and bias. Viewing them from the perspective of the Gerudo alone and not from Hyrule's combined history and culture. This is not surprising though, both the ancient and present-day Gerudo are very particular about the memorials to historical figures. Not only are they all portrayed as female, presumably in their own image, but they are also left nameless and are instead inscribed with poetry or singular adjectives like vigilant. It's no wonder why the identity of these figures are eventually forgotten as the ages creep by. The existence of the 8th Heroine, on the other hand, seemed to be completely unknown to the present-day Gerudo, or at the very least written off as nothing more than an urban legend. One description even mentions that the remote section of the highlands where the statue resides is one that the Gerudo dare not set foot in because of the many dangers, including the extreme weather conditions. As such, none of the Gerudo who are alive today have ever laid eyes upon the 8th Heroine, let alone known who or what it is supposed to personify. When it comes to the ancient Gerudo, however, it is a different story. It's all but certain that they were well aware of an 8th Heroine. Not only are they the most likely candidate for its construction, seeing as the architecture is close to identical to the other 7, but the Yiga clan hideout, which is confirmed to be an ancient Gerudo archaeological site, features 8 similar-looking statues facing each other in a circle. Likewise, we can see that the 7 massive monuments tucked away inside the desert have an empty space that would have fit an 8th statue perfectly. One final detail about the 8th Heroine is that the sword they are supposed to clench onto, as seen on the other 7, is missing from the statue itself, and can instead be found atop the summit of the highlands not far away. For what reason? No one knows for sure.
So these are some of the basic facts about the statues. There is a bit more to it, but we'll cover those as we go along. Given how few people seem to be aware of the existence of the 8th Heroine, it's hard to pinpoint its exact placement in Hyrule's history, or which parts of the rumors about it are true or false, especially when the culture that supposedly built it seems completely oblivious to it and thus cannot provide us any insight. I joked before about Patricia, but she's actually one of only 2 beings in the world who mention the 8th Heroine by name through dialogue, the other being Bozai. You know, the creepy guy who tries to get into Link's pants and gives you the quest to seek out the statue. Not even the town archaeologist who, I remind you, actively studies the history of the 7 heroines every day, ever even mentions the rumors about an 8th statue. In the case of Bozai, I can understand why he would know about it since he is a Hylian. He says he's been intrigued by the stories of an 8th heroine ever since he was a child, so apparently it is a legend that some Hylians dare speak of. But how in the heck does the pet seal belonging to the leader of the Gerudo know about it, and why has no one ever caught on to the fact? Even the woman who interprets her words of wisdom doesn't even flinch when mentioning the 8th heroine. Look at her, she's completely unfazed. I mean, come on lady, it's a central part of your religion. This would be like if a Christian found out there were secretly 11 commandments, but I don't know, Moses lost one on the way down from the mountain. Anyway, there's 2 important details which have given shape to many similar theories and verdicts about the nature and identity of the 8th heroine. First is the claim that, as stated before, the statue itself as well as the person it embodies have been wiped clean from history. And second is a quest log that says that despite being lost in memory, she is still worshipped to this day by her faithful in the Gerudo Highlands. Now, the only faction we know that lives in the Highlands are, of course, the Yiga, who have been fiercely loyal to Ganon ever since they seceded from the Sheikah 10,000 years ago. The fact that the 8th heroine has been wiped from history yet is still worshipped by what is essentially a Ganon cult has led many to believe that this individual could have been on the wrong side of history and possibly involved in some nefarious act. Perhaps a sage gone rogue who betrayed the other 7, or, as some suggest, it may even be a memorial to Ganon himself. Why else would the Yiga of all people pay homage to this forgotten idol? There's a piece of NPC dialogue that reiterates the same basic concept as the quest log, except here, instead of calling them her faithful, it instead refers to them as the people who hang around the Gerudo Highlands, which further reinforces that this would indeed have to be the Yiga, as they and they alone fit the description. The game generally doesn't refer to things like monsters or wildlife as people. There is, however, one problem, one that has plagued the Zelda series for decades and continues to do so here: localization differences. The original Japanese text never actually refers to these mystery worshippers as her faithful, nor as the people who hang around the Gerudo Highlands. It simply says her followers instead. On the surface, this may seem like a very minor difference, but for a theory, this can have massive repercussions. The English text advocates that these devotees are human beings, which inadvertently eliminates any alternatives, because, like I said, as far as people go, there are none who hang around these parts in the present day. No one but the Yiga. Well, and Link, but he doesn't count. Meanwhile, the Japanese text keeps it ambiguous. After all, followers can apply to anyone, really. Anyone who's sentient, anyway. I believe that this tiny, seemingly harmless translation difference may just be responsible for limiting our perspective on the mystery of the 8th heroine, since what if this isn't referring to the Yiga at all, but instead someone else? The Yiga have never been a very logical choice to me, despite the English text insisting that they are. They don't seem to concern themselves at all with the reverence of ancient monuments, especially those belonging to other cultures. In fact, they appear to be completely indifferent, even downright disrespectful towards them. For example, the statues located in their hideout, which features the 8th one, all have their face dishonorably covered in drapes, which displays their insignia. No doubt intended as a giant middle finger to the Gerudo, who they are still at war with. They do the same thing to Sheikah idols too, by the way. I see no evidence that they held these monuments in any sort of high regard, so why would they venture out into the frigid cold to worship this one? Sure, their hideout is in the Highlands, but it's still quite the expedition to get to the 8th heroine. Another aspect that potentially works against the Yiga is the extreme secrecy behind the statue, as well as the timeline of events. What's quite distinctive about the statue is that, unlike the site of the 7 heroines, it doesn't feature a Sheikah shrine. The ancient Sheikah constructed their shrines all over Hyrule, in the most obscure, secretive, oldest sites imaginable. Find an ancient ruin, chances are there's gonna be a shrine nearby, even in structures that stem stem from the time of Skyward Sword, which is an insanely long time ago. So why not here? Could it be that even the Sheikah from 10,000 years ago were oblivious to the 8th statue? If so, how would the Yiga know where it is, let alone who the statue represents? The clan didn't form until after the calamity of 10,000 years ago, when the king of Hyrule started persecuting the Sheikah and their technology. If we stick by the Japanese text and assume that these so-called followers are not necessarily human beings, more options suddenly become available, and one in particular stands out as a prime candidate for me, especially in context with the sequel. An intelligent being who's not only present in the Highlands, but one that actually visits the area in and around the 8th Heroine frequently. Despite originating from the Faron region, the lightning spirit Faron has two secondary flight paths, one at Lake Hylia and the other sees it snaking around the Gerudo Highlands, drifting in from the southern part of the mountain range, right past the Forgotten Sword, makes its way close to the top of the statue, then travels in between the statue and the sword, after which it curves back around the summit for subsequent visits until finally taking off into the heavens at some point. But it gets even better, because now take a look at the flight path of Dinral, the fire dragon from the Elden region. After spawning and passing along the back of the volcano, it heads southwest, then makes a straight shot through the canyon towards the cliffside where the statue is located, until it too decides to call it a day and head for the clouds. I'd say it almost looks like it's on a pilgrimage of sorts. The only dragon who doesn't exert a similar behavior is Nadra, and while that does somewhat weaken the argument for a statue worshipping ceremony by the dragons, we do have to keep in mind that Nadra has been incapacitated by Ganon for what we can presume to be a considerable amount of time before Link wakes up from his stasis, and depending on the order in which you explore Hyrule, it remains trapped on the mountain until Link finally cures its affliction. A valid enough excuse to skip daily service for a while, I suppose.
With that said, what could the ancient dragon spirits who have been around since time immemorial possibly want with a statue like this? Well, that all depends on what the secret identity behind this monument is. If it is someone they knew well, or as the in-game text suggests, followed, it would make perfect sense for the dragon spirits to pay their respects to them, especially if said individual died or sacrificed themselves for a greater purpose in the distant past. As mighty and majestic as the dragons may appear, they are not above gods, sages, contemporary spirit guardians, or other types of deities. In Skyward Sword, for example, they control parts of their respective provinces, but did so in the service of Goddess Hylia, who appointed them to protect the surface in her absence. And here's where another major difference in the localization comes into play. The nickname of the 8th Heroine we have been reiterating throughout the video is actually not accurate to the original Japanese name. There, it is the copper giant, Goddess. You can see the impact of omitting a single word, as it makes a world of difference. As opposed to just another sage, this statue is hinted to be a tribute to a goddess of sorts, which is not nearly on the same level as a sage. This brings us to the latest footage for Tears of the Kingdom. The figure depicted on the mural definitely fits the characteristics of a deity. They appear to reside high in the heavens, suspended on a floating platform with rays of light shining down upon them. More importantly, the 7 orb-like artifacts that surround them could reinforce a connection between this entity and 7 other beings. The aforementioned sages, perhaps, just like we see with the statues, 8 in total, with one different from the rest. Speaking of differences, there's one more feature about the 8th statue we haven't mentioned so far. It's not just that the material is different and the sword is missing, but it also happens to be a mirrored version of the other 7 monuments. And lo and behold, what do we see on the mural? 2 depictions of the same symbol, but mirroring each other. One on the side of what is presumably to be an incarnation of Zelda, which matches the symbol on the orbs, and the mirror opposite on the side of this deity figure. A coincidence? It definitely could be, but if it is a very interesting coincidence. If this theory is correct, and the dragons are indeed the ones worshipping the 8th Heroine statue instead of the Yiga, naturally the obvious candidate to shoot for would be Goddess Hylia, given the history between her and the dragon spirits. And it very well could be, but we certainly shouldn't rule out other possibilities as well. There's a good chance that this is a brand new deity whom we have never seen or met before.
Let's wrap up the video with a final piece of conjecture, one that my guest speaker may not resonate with, so I want to make it clear that these are my thoughts and mine alone. Whoever or whatever this creature on the mural ends up being, chances are we probably won't get any decisive answers until we actually, play Tears of the Kingdom. In that sense, the mystery behind the 8th Heroine remains for now. However, I do have a strong conviction that this character and the 8th Heroine are likely one and the same. There's just too many overlapping themes and coincidences for me to ignore. In fact, I would take it a step further and say that the spectral being who has Ganondorf pinned down and sealed deep underground may also be connected to it. It definitely has a spiritual, out-of-this-world kind of look and feel to it, so maybe the green hand that remains is what's left of this ancient deity. The figure on the mural is shown to be pretty huge in comparison to a regular human, or at least compared to Zelda if this is indeed her. Now look at the size comparison between Link's hand and the one belonging to this entity. It's like twice the size. Whatever this creature used to be, it too must have been pretty big. When Link absorbs the green energy, the entity seems to pass its essence down to the hero, which explains why he can suddenly conjure up these almost godlike powers, like the ability to control time or become incorporeal and move through solid matter. In context with today's subject, it would also clarify why this individual has been completely forgotten over the course of history. Perhaps long ago they sacrificed their very existence to keep Ganondorf's physical body from being set loose upon Hyrule once again. They were then memorialized in stone by the ancients, but as the years crept by, the memory of their sacrifice and even their very identity was slowly lost to time, which is a common occurrence in the land of Hyrule. It only took 10,000 years for the calamity to completely fade into myth, which, mind you, was a huge battle involving giant robots, and whatever transpired back when Ganondorf was still human clearly took place much longer ago. And that wraps up today's video. If you liked it, please be sure to check out Conrad's video as well over on his channel, the Commonwealth Realm. And if you didn't, be sure to check out Conrad's video over on his channel regardless, because it may be way better than mine. A special thanks goes to LoruleanHistorian for providing me with the Japanese texts, and of course to my mods, Discord community, Patreons, and channel members. I will see you all in the next video. This is Don signing off, and have a good one.